Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am very excited for this conversation, particularly because it sits at an intersection that I'm very passionate about, which is operations, clinical care, and revenue growth. And so today we are going to go through so many very practical and tactical steps communities can take to get new revenue streams fairly easily. And I'm going to introduce my co-host here in just 1 second, but I want to give some background on this webinar that started with a pretty simple idea. When Ara and I were comparing notes, we realized that there's a lot of revenue that's sitting in the communities that's just not being captured. I work with clinicians on the assessment side, on the workflow side, and Ara's on the continence product side, and we were comparing notes and saying, like, there's so many of these places that could get more revenue. How can we help enable them to do that? We know that communities and operational leaders are constantly being asked to grow revenue in the buildings, control labor costs, improve care in ways that somehow, magically do not add complexity or burden on people's time. And we think we've identified some ways that we can share that you can do that, starting with kind of the history of where these revenue streams come in, and then also along the lines of how they can be implemented in senior living specifically. So we're going to take a minute. Ara, you want to do a quick introduction of yourself before we hop in?
Sure. Yeah, that was a great intro, Trisha. Happy to be here to talk about an area that you mentioned about additional revenue streams when it's literally under your nose, and looking at it from a place of, is this something that is going to be easy, simple, effective, and part of the workflow? Because the one thing that we know in senior living is if it's not simple and easy, it's not going to happen. So a little bit about me. I'm the Chief Clinical Officer of the Total Incontinence Management Program. This is a program that was developed about 8 years ago. And it started with one resident in one community 8 years ago, and primarily because that resident was suffering from recurrent UTIs, and has blossomed over the 8 years to become the standard of care in senior living. Additionally, won the best of the best of Argentum. So the approach today is essentially taking off the blindfolds of looking at revenues in the senior living communities.
Absolutely. And I love what you said. I'm going to jump off that. I'm so excited to get into it. But just quick background for me. My name is Trisha Cole. I'm the COO and General Counsel for ALIS, ALIS, Assisted Living's intelligent software. And I spend my days working with clinical and operational teams, mainly at the C level or the regional level, sometimes a community level, on how to implement workflows in an electronic health system or operational platform, how to optimize assessments. And so I've brought some really juicy tips that I'm excited to share for you that I see as best practice for additional services revenue and additional products revenue. So I'm keeping those in my pocket for a little bit later. But Ara brought to my attention that, hey, this is actually something that's been done in hospitals for a very long time. Why are we not helping support the communities in implementing these with different parts of their business? Some portfolios and communities, are ahead in this area. Some people are all different areas of adopting it. But Ara, do you want to talk a little bit about what you kind of know from the hospital side and how you see that kind of transferring to the senior living model?
If I'm going to jump into the hospital side, I'm afraid everyone on the webinar is going to jump off.
Good
But
point.
there is a parallel here. And the parallel is that your community is in the middle of a lot of services that you're providing that maybe you're not even aware of, or maybe you're too busy to look at, right? And the way Trisha and I have collaborated in the past is you have to make it simple. And the way to make it simple is to first take a step back and unpack on how it works. Okay. What does the ecosystem of a community look like? And I have a background, I have a master's in clinical services and operations from Harvard Medical School. And what we were taught is the hospital service model. Okay, so let me just kind of share with you how a hospital works. A hospital has several different services that they provide to their patients. One of them, for example, is orthopedic surgery, right? This is a high revenue, high margin service that the hospital provides. Okay. Another service model is psychiatry. Psychiatry is often looked at as a loss leader. It's a service that it provides, but the revenue it brings in is not as high to to help the hospital maintain the revenue that it needs to keep the lights on. It just isn't. Okay. Then there's another service model or another service for pharmacy. You know, when the medications are being dispensed throughout the hospital, this is a very specific service with very specific protocols in place, along with, for example, home health, right? Which is a revenue stream after discharge. Where does the resident or patient go after they leave the hospital? They go to post-acute, right? And oftentimes the post-acute is part of the services that the hospital provides. So in a nutshell, imagine a bicycle wheel. And in the middle of the bicycle wheel, you have the hub, and then you have a lot of spokes, a lot of services that is being provided by the hospital. Now, we all know that senior living is not is the social model, right? But the reality is that it is in the middle of a lot of services that you are providing the residents. That's the reality, okay? And what are some of the services that a senior living community provides their residents? Okay. Incontinent products is one. You have to be able to provide the incontinent products, or the families are providing it. Once money is being spent by families, it becomes a revenue generating model, right? It becomes an area of care that you want to take a look at and say, is this generating revenue or is it a loss, right? Hospice and home health, an additional indirect service line that you are providing the residents, right? Medication management, right? Are you using the right vendor to provide the medications and the
I have some
pharmacy?
specific tips on this one too that I can share. But yeah, good point.
Go for it, Trish.
Oh,
Trish.
well, yeah, I was just going to hop in. Also, I was going to say it's weird because you have a master's degree from Harvard. I also have a master's in clinical services operation, but from the School of Hard Knocks. I've literally done every single thing wrong. So we come together with a great academic background and literally from the perspective of 13 years of making every mistake that can possibly be made. So I just wanted to say we have great synergy. That's why we get along well. Um, any thoughts on that?
My thought is I've probably made a lot more mistakes than you have.
Not true, not true. And we're going to talk some actual dollars and cents that are related to these lines. But you said something I want to build on is really that the structure for these is what's going to create scalability. And I want to give you guys just a little tool to use when looking at the products, the actual products, because I have a whole other thing for you guys related to different services. But since we're talking about some products here, really look at any products that you have that have high utilization in your community and that have a predictable need, and those are really the ones that you can standardize and bundle, which means you can negotiate with your partners that provide those, or potentially go to a consolidated partner, which is going to help, down the road with value-based care and all kinds of things there. But consolidate on the vendor, get better rates. Some examples to give you are definitely the continence products. Other ones that I've seen are mobility aids. skincare supplies, and nutritional supplements, depending on how your community is set up to deal with those, because you do have to have an inventory management system, right? Like operationally, it's important to think through how you're going to track this. I'm not an accountant, but I know they say COGS all the time, track your price and track. We're going to get into that in the next slide here. But the basic takeaway here is products become revenue lines when they are structured, not ad hoc. So if people in the community, if staff are giving nutritional supplements or skincare supplies or any of those ad hoc versus a kind of a structured program, that's where you could be losing money or is an opportunity for revenue. Those are just some operational tools that I thought may be helpful when you are considering what to do in the communities. Ara, did I spark any thoughts before we kind of talk some brass tacks and cash on this next slide?
I want to reiterate how you defined what to focus on. A high need, high utilization product. Did I hear that correctly?
Yep, predictable need. Yeah, predictable need, high utilization.
Yep. So yeah, let's get into some dollars and cents.
Let's do it.
Because looking at something that is predictive need, high utilization, right? You're looking
Yep.
at a product that you have to buy, also known as an inelastic demand. What does that mean? You have to buy these products, or somebody has to buy the products. Now, families always have the choice. At the end of the day, the families are trusting you for their care. They don't often have a lot of time to do the correct research and understand what the true cost is of the products that they're giving their loved ones versus the price that they're paying.
I'm going
Okay.
to sneak to the next size, the next slide here for a second. Yeah.
Yep. So what do families see? A family sees a cheap product per unit, right? They feel like they're in complete control. They're buying it Amazon, right? They trust Amazon. I'm buying 5,000 things. I'm going to buy some stuff from mom too, right? But is Amazon truly a lower cost? I'm going to respectfully disagree, right? Because what's the cost of a urinary tract infection? What's the cost of a fall? There's a lot of capital expenditure these days with the AI and the falls and the technology, which is fantastic, right? But that's a CapEx. We're talking about something in the service line to turn it into a revenue stream that you have to purchase. If the family is purchasing it, they might as well purchase something that's going to lower their cost, right? And having that discussion with families from an educational perspective goes a long way, because a lot of times families are saying, well, the cost of care, I want to control the cost of care. The cost of care is going to significantly go up if they get a UTI, a fall, or a pressure injury, hands down, right? And that's my area of expertise. How can we lower and control the cost of care to a family where they're happy and the loved one is staying for a longer period of time? And one of the ways to do that is by educating them on a program that is also going to add a revenue stream to the community because it's a service line. It's a predictable need and high utilization. That turns it into an opportunity.
Yeah, and when we have a lot of these conversations with clinicians and operational people, and one thing that we hear is, when someone's doing the assessment and they already know there's going to be a cost for care, sometimes the person doing the assessment or the evaluation can feel uncomfortable having conversations about things that incur an additional cost. First of all, have you experienced this? I know I have. And second, is there any way that you coach people about that? Like, is it actually the executive director that has that conversation about the additional prices? Or do you have your nurse or person doing the evaluation? Do you have anything that you've seen that works really well there?
I have, and the thing that works well is making it as a part of the care plan. This is not an add-on. This is not an upsell, okay? Because the care plan includes, and during the assessment, right, the person is assessed to be incontinent, for example, right? And part of the care plan is the services that you are going to provide that individual. And that discussion is often much easier had when it's packaged and the executive director or the business office manager is now talking to the family about the care plan which the nurse has assessed.
Mm-hmm. So splitting up. So what you're suggesting is having the person doing the assessment just, get the facts and then separating out as like, here is the full plan of care and the cost associated as one item versus sort of making it feel like disjointed pieces. Am I hearing that the right way?
You are, because families, in general, families don't like to be upsold. That's the reality, right? They
No one
don't.
does, right?
No one likes to be, right, upsold. Like you go to a restaurant, they want to upsell you on the additional, things and all that
Okay.
stuff. Nobody really wants to be upsold. But if it's part of the package of care and it's approached from a place of, we have done our research,
Hmm.
we know what's best for your loved one, because when you moved your loved one in, you said that they want to get a good night's sleep. You said, family member, that they want to make friends. You said that they don't want to be isolated anymore. And this is part of the care plan for us to achieve what we've mutually agreed on. So it's not an upsell, but it's an approach of care.
Mhm.
And because the community has looked at this one of several service lines that is being offered to the family member, it becomes a win-win where you have to buy the product. It's a product which has an inelastic demand. It has a high utilization, predictive need. Okay, so might as well make it the programmatic aspect where it's baked into part of the care plan, and then let the business office manager and then the executive director talk about the care plan that's being suggested and offered to the family member to come back to the needs of the resident, right?
Mhm.
The family member is moving into their loved one into a community for a certain reason.
Yeah, I agree. One thing operationally and clinically, definitely that I see to build on Ara's words, but give a perspective is you can very easily set this up to where you are giving the resident and the family a choice and giving also educational aspects because I have seen when you set up an evaluation or assessment where you give obviously if the family wants to bring in the materials themselves, for example, it doesn't matter what it is, nutritional supplements, continence products, whatever we're talking about, there's a choice for them to do it on their own, right? You want to give them the choice. But then if they need any staff assistance or, help procuring, then it always goes to your preferred vendor. So that way you're not managing, a lot of different vendors. This is very, very successfully done on the pharmacy side. So I always, when I talk to people, are you optimizing, making sure there's an additional cost or charge for an outside pharmacy when you're coordinating with that? So, and I mean, I don't see any pushback typically because that's a preferential item that you're doing. So I look at it kind of the same way here. You can always still, respect the resident and the family's choice, but they can be educated about what, that you offer at the community. But if they need staff assistance, then the provider is not necessarily optional anymore, or there's fewer options. So I think there's ways to just kind of layer that on that can be very elegant and incorporated and coached in the assessment and the materials obviously, but this is all kind of talking about how we approach the different prices. I do want to see if I can figure out how to go back to my previous slide here, and talk about actual, you have the resident experience, you have the family experience that we've been talking about in the assessment, but how does this translate into money for the communities? The part I really liked about this when I started looking at it is it actually helps both top line and bottom line revenue, depending on how you're able to implement it. And what I mean by that is that you can get more revenue from these packages, which is 100% proven. Even even being consistent with what, other vendors, even Amazon, can be comparable, but you're getting more revenue, but you're also just getting more profit on those packages, which helps the bottom line. So Aura, do you want to speak to this slide a little bit in terms of, this is just, an example, but I thought it'd be helpful for people to wrap their head around like actual cash money here.
Yeah, I will. And I'm going to first draw the parallel to what you mentioned. You talked about vendors a lot, right? And part of any hub and spoke model, any service line, is partnering up with the right vendors, right? And do your homework. So I would encourage any community to do their homework of which product line, which service line, which vendor am I going to partner with? That's really important. And I'll give the parallel to a hospital, right? We talked about the hospital, the orthopedic. One of the largest, most high revenue, profitable surgeries in a hospital is knee replacement. Okay. Now, the hospital has done a lot of homework and landed on one vendor for the knee replacement product, for the actual knees that they purchase. And that's because they did their homework and they found the vendor that works, meets their needs, and the support that they need, right? So I'd always encourage you to look at all your options out there when you're looking at a service line and you're looking at which vendor to partner with. One of the vendors is the company that I work with, Tim, and this is a case study, okay? And what we did is we broke down the case study into a typical community of 120 beds, 100 assisted living, 20 memory care, and what the different scenarios are if you were to lean into the service line concept, right? So community A has no system. Products are sourced from Amazon, family, there's no real tracking, no revenue, no billing of product. It's a service line that is not consistent with a particular vendor. There's no person that's in charge. There's really no support, but you're getting by. However, you have to use the product because it is a high need product with high utilization, okay? You can't go without products. So this is one, they're losing money. Why? This is what I see often. Families don't send enough product. The product does not correlate to the type of individual that needs the product. In other words, the resident is just too incontinent. It's not a clinical grade product. The stuff being sold on Amazon is typically not for the individuals that we are caring for in memory care and assisted living. So what's the result? The result is you're getting by. You're humming, right? But you may have a lot of challenges from having to purchase product on a Friday afternoon because there's not enough product in the community. You may be losing residents because they're getting urinary tract infections, falls, or skin issues, okay, which are higher incident rates. And one big thing is odor. Everyone is doing tours and what they want to minimize odor. So that's community A. Community B is they're kind of sort of leaning into the service line, right? There's some tracking in place, inconsistent, partial billing. It's not part of the standard of care. Now, that's better than community A, okay? Because there is a revenue stream, but the community is leaving money on the table because it's not a standard of care, and there are clinical challenges as well, right? What happens if a resident is not on a program that is clinical grade and offering the support that the community needs, right? Where the nurse can just pick up the phone and talk to the vendor. And then community C is complete integration. Out of 120 residents, and it's a fact, you're going to have about 30 plus about 16, you're going to have 46 residents that are incontinent, okay? 33%, here's a fact, 33% of residents in assisted living are incontinent, 80% of residents in memory care are incontinent. That's in peer-reviewed, published journals. So if the community has a standard of care, okay, and 41 residents are on the program, you're looking at $1,000 top line revenue per month. Now, one community may say, well, that's not that much. It's $1,000 a month. They're saving $1,000 a month. They're increasing their length of stay because they're reducing the UTIs and falls. They have happier caregivers because they're not dealing with the leaks and the odor and the constant changes. And for an operator that has 40 communities, that's about $500,000 a year in top line revenue. So that's no joke from one service line. And imagine if you had this approach to every service line, right? It'll add up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to confirm because you said money saved, but you really mean like additional revenue here, right? For the community
Yes.
C. Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I thought.
That's top line additional revenue on top. Exactly. Exactly. The money saved on the back end, what I meant to say was the length of stay, right? Less vacancies, better
Yeah.
care efficiency, less. I mean, who tracks laundry? Who tracks the amount of detergent you're? I mean, these are little things that really add up if you're locked in to a service line and maximizing it.
I have, do you happen to have any knowledge, Ara, about whether any of this can be funded by Medicare?
Straight Medicare does not cover incontinent products,
Got it.
period. Now, I will get a little deeper into specifics because I often get the question, well, Medicare covers it. Okay. If you have a dual eligible resident, that's Medi-Medi, Medicaid and Medicare. The Medicaid portion covers incontinent products, and it's very state specific. If you're in California, they go through a durable medical equipment supplier. If you're in Florida, the Medicaid is one amount that's given to the assisted living community, and part of that amount per day includes incontinent products. So that's Medicaid. So Medicaid does cover incontinent products. Medicare does not. Some Medicare Advantage plans give you like a credit card for over the counter $200, $300 every quarter. Okay. And that credit card can be used to purchase incontinent products.
And other things like, would it cover things like nutritional supplements?
It would. It would cover nutritional supplements, vitamins. Um, it's the aperture is pretty wide for what that OTC credit card would cover.
Got it. Got it. That's very helpful. I was going to say another thought I had with going through this, again, my kind of perspective when people are implementing this. I always recommend to you know you want to do something, start with a very simple process. And again, that's the structure, that's the what will give it scalability. Try it out in a community or a couple communities, tweak the process as needed, but making kind of standardized, structured revenue lines across the portfolio, it definitely is something I recommend as like a a quarter or a half a year goal to kind of wrap your head around everything that you want to do, because once you get one structure in place, it's pretty easy to layer on the others. So just operationally, that's what I recommend. I was going to do a quick check and see, Taylor, if we had any questions, or if Ara, you're seeing any questions.
No questions as of right now.
Okay. Well, I technically got that Medicaid one from a text message, so I'm taking real time questions here too. But yeah, it's very helpful to kind of know about the different payment programs, because one of the things we're going to talk about is how this can intersect with value-based care. But this is some juicy stuff. I wanted to give some examples that I see. So Alice is definitely a platform. It's an evaluation. It's an electronic health record. We do integrate with the TIM product, which is how we got to be here today, because our assessment can trigger those plans and can automatically inform the TIM team that there's continence products. Please start this service. Please end this service if they move out or on leave. That's all automated. But outside of that, with any EHR or any assessment, I want to give you guys some real life things to think about in these different categories. So I put these more in terms of definitely services. One thing that's not on here, because I have to include some things that aren't on here, is one, company level, thinking about the product lines of revenue that you have. Respite care, how do you incorporate respite care? How do you incorporate possibly community health services? We're seeing a lot of people get involved in local communities outside of just respite, but doing some outreach or services in the home. So those are a couple very, very macro things to think about. Going into a community, the clinical side, the assessment side, some of the categories that are on here. So one that is not specific, but kind of in the incontinence is start with your high spend, high cost ADL items. So your activities of daily living. So these have, I'm not talking about the activities, the IADLs that they're showing here, but look at your 2-person assistance, your feeding assistance, transfers, behaviors, toileting, incontinence. These are things, again, like the products that you can have high utilization or predictable need, but you're creating tiered acuity pricing that is standardized. So the ADL section is definitely a way that you can review from a revenue perspective. The other one that's on here is the medication management. On the most common ones I see here are related to complexity of the medication regime. Is it over 10 medications or over so many medications per med pass? The big one, diabetic management, making sure you're capturing the time there. Outside pharmacy, chronic condition support, and care coordination are things that can be sometimes monetized above and beyond the normal care level. Some people want them to be in the care level, but it's worth having a discussion about just whatever you're doing that intentionally. The third category over here on the left-hand side, the activities, sometimes in the assessment, it's like a concierge service or a IADL, instrumental activity of daily life. Transportation services, errands, shopping, beauty salon, obviously. And what I've been seeing more is technology support. Are your staff spending time with residents, doing things, on the internet with their iPad, or, not necessarily always making the same kind of phone calls it used to be, but using devices to do that. Sometimes I see those kind of captured as concierge services as a revenue line. Food and nutrition, assisted living, part of the reason it's a complex and nuanced setting is because it is, part clinical, part rental, and part dining and hospitality. This is a treasure trove in terms of specialty diets, either by clinical need, which normally, it's 50-50 if there's an upcharge, if there's a physician's order on that, but sometimes by preference. Sometimes communities are honoring preferences and charging extra there. And tray services is another piece that can be captured either ad hoc or in the assessment. The physical therapy thing, I think Ara talked a lot about that. But one that's not on here, I wanted to highlight two last ones. One, memory care specific programming is an opportunity, either structured engagement programs, and that can be really on the AL or memory care side, different types of education, community education, and high touch staffing models, whether that's one-on-one time or, a transition program that you have in place. There are places, other service lines to monetize. The final little bonus tip that I have for you guys to think about here is how much time is being spent with families. Sometimes when you have families that need extra time and attention or updates, I have seen that as an additional charge very successfully. So some of these things are a question of, culturally, what do you want to have and standardized in your portfolio for the type of residents that you cater to? And those are just some, very specific tips and tricks on that. Any thoughts, anything I missed there, Ara?
So taking a step back, if we're looking at all of these service lines that you mentioned, it is a very concerted approach of, number one, understanding who you're working with and what the common goal is. You're absolutely right about looking at all these service lines, and the reason why we have kind of built this relationship is because Alice is able to stay in the middle, if that makes any sense, and allow the community to build on top of that, right? With the services that Alice allows. And that's how Tim has integrated with Alice.
Mhm.
The one thing that I would focus on is we all talk about vacancies, and how we don't want vacancies. Yes, you want to fill the vacancy, but sometimes these service models can actually offset the revenue that you're not generating from a vacancy, right? So it allows you to offset that because you're looking at each service line and you're saying, why am I not monetizing this where it's a win-win? And I want to make it very clear, this is not a way to get more money from a family. This is a way to give a better quality of life to a resident through education and the right partnerships. That's critical, right? Because looking at all these services, oftentimes the family's already paying for it in one way or another, right? Whether it's time, nobody wants to get that phone call, Tricia, at 5 o'clock on a Friday saying, oh, your loved one, needs product. And on the flip side, I think you brought up a really good point. The nurse does not have the time for a phone call. And if they do, they should really look into that and how much time they're spending with families, and is that a service line, right? Because
Mhm.
what I see a lot of times is when from the incontinence world, if they're not standardized and somebody has to make that phone call to the family, the person making that phone call is dreading that phone call. They just don't want to make it. And I don't blame them because that 2-minute phone call leads to a 45-minute phone call, a 30-minute phone call, when they were not planning on having a 30-minute phone call, when all they really needed to do is ask for more incontinent products. And they wouldn't need that if they already have a program in place. So this model is proven. This model was created by hospitals and has been perfected by hospitals over decades, and is senior living next? Is the approach next? Is that microcosm, that ecosystem of your community of looking at this and saying, I'm touching all these folks, right? Let me take a step back and really understand who I'm partnering up with, how I'm partnering up with, and what we can do to make it better.
Mhm. I was going to ask you a quick question. Two pieces. So we're kind of using all these our lines of revenue. We have Ara with us and with the incontinence product side. So it's such a good way to zoom in granularly on what does one service line look like when it comes alive. I do want to say for specifically for Tim R1, explore a little bit about what is what differentiates about your product specifically, and then the second piece, that's a differential in product. And then also discuss a little bit I can take in terms of how you're differentiating, being advanced in terms of integration and on the technology side. But can you speak a little just to the differentiation on the product side?
So the products we have two differentiators. Number one is it's clinical grade product. So there's a lot of technology out there. Happy to talk about technology. I've looked at all of them. We invest all our technology in two things. Number one is the products that are created. We source the best products and raw materials from across the world. So what that does is keeps residents clean and dry. And number two is we're a data-driven company that has created a system to make the lives of our customers very easy. Because we looked at senior living, and unless it's simple, easy, and effective, the program will not work, right? And there's a lot of good products out there, very expensive, more expensive than the products that we have, but it has to do with the clinical grade products and the system that we've created to make the lives of the residents, the families, and our customers we serve very easy and simple.
And when you're talking about the system, is that the actual physical staff to resident system, or like the procurement, like you and I working on the assessment piece system, or both?
So it starts with the resident, right? And then we kind of back into it. So we look at the resident and we say, we're giving clinical grade products. Number two, we look at the caregiver. How's the caregiver handling the resident? How are they changing the resident? How much time are they spending? Are they wasting time dealing with odor or leaks, etc.? And then we look at how the products are delivered, right? Because a lot of times you want to have complete control over your cost and your revenue. And we looked at some other programs that just didn't have a very clear understanding of what the spend is and what the revenue is. So we locked that in, right? And then we customize and curate it per resident. So we're ensuring that from a clinical side, you're getting the outcomes that you hope for. So after that, we looked at how can we make this even simpler on the community? And that's where the integration came in, right? So we looked at the entire clinical side, getting clinical grade products, customizing and curating it, making the life of caregivers easier. But then we looked at how can we integrate with an EHR so that the system of ordering and billing and control is closed, right? So it's a closed system. Instead of saying, okay, so we're billing, but we don't know how we're going to order, or we don't know what we ordered and what we're going to bill. It's complete control over the service line, and that's the way to get it profitable.
Mm-hmm. And I wrote down a bunch of notes. One of the things that I wanted to highlight and can talk about a little bit with the Alice integration, but I did want to give, I forget the exact example you gave me one time, but there was something like very, very tactically that I feel like is important, because you talk about like the in terms of differential, like when a resident is asleep or in the middle of the night, and there's a actual product difference there in terms of something that wakes them up and something that lets them sleep. Remind me a little bit, or share with our audience here a little bit about that, and that approach.
So a lot of times we look at falls in the middle of the night, right? And a lot of falls happen in the middle of the night. And there's a lot of technology right now that's trying to reduce that, and that's fantastic. And then there's great results. But one technology that we have invested in is giving clinical grade products and allowing the resident to sleep through the night. And we do that because the liquid is being pulled away from the skin and turned into gel. And due to that, the resident is not waking up.
Got it.
And a lot of families actually tell us, do not wake my loved one up because they need a good night's sleep, no matter what. Well, they're shooting themselves in the foot, because they're going to wake up wet, they're going to have a UTI, they're going to have skin issues, and it's just going to cascade. It's not going to get any better. So our technology allows the residents to sleep comfortably through the night, and we have patented odor blocking technology. Nobody in the world has that. What that means is you're not going to have the odor. You're not going to have the odor when a prospect is walking down the halls, right? Or a caregiver is checking in on a resident. So our approach in general is very simple. We do all the hard work on the back end, right? And just let the resident sleep through the night.
Yeah. I love that. I think that is just such a real life thing that I hear in the communities that's helpful. Do we have any questions? I want to do a question check.
No questions.
You know, one question that comes up often is
Yeah.
choice, is family choice,
Yeah.
Tricia, right? Well, you know, I have the choice, and please give the choice, right? But this, I don't know what I don't know, is my point. And if you're looking at these service lines from a place of strength and saying, I'm going to stop the constantly putting fires out in my community, right? And I need control over a high need, predictable need, highly utilized product, I would recommend taking a step back and saying, what's the best approach here, you know? And then offering the recommendations to the families as part of the care plan. It's that simple.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it may be, I mean, I can sneak forward a couple slides before we preview, but what I'll go back to the value-based care one. But one thing, so regardless of, what software you use or what products you're doing, there is an aspect of this in today's world. If you decide like, hey, this is right for our communities, our portfolio, we want to put in the structure, then it is time to do perfect say what are the tools that you have in place and can they talk to each other, right? One of the things I said at the beginning is you want the additional lines of revenue without complexity.
Right.
Obviously I'm super biased on this, right? Because we have a software and I recommend this for everybody, but when Ara and I got introduced is to where we can create a evaluation tool that when someone selects this automatically kind of updates the resident profile and sends it to the right partner and can communicate with all different members of your technology stack. Or any practical feedbacks? I know I've heard some, but I can't think of any right now, like in the communities that are using this integrated piece, or from your perspective as a service provider, knowing when people go on leave or moved out, how is that technology integrated piece like changed your business or changed the community's business? Again, regardless of vendor, how has just that connection made a difference?
I will give you a very simple scenario that I think every person on this call may connect with, and that's when a resident moves out and they have to stop service on a lot of things, right? And the resident moves out, the individual sits down in front of their computer and is going to send an email, and I'll give the example for Tim. Please stop services of Tim. Resident has moved out, right? And the second they're going to send that email is when somebody knocks on their door and says, can I grab you for a minute? It's a real quick question, right? And that person goes up, answers the question, and then another person asks them a question. And then a month later, they realize I never stopped that service.
Yeah.
Now we work with those individuals because we understand that happens, but with the integration, that's all automated. So should they forget, they don't even have to let us know anymore, because it's a complete integration of stopping the service because we are automatically getting that. And that's the beauty of taking the factor of we're all human, right? And we're in senior living. There's busy and very busy, right? But when you're automating a lot of these things and you're integrating, that human factor and the fact of potentially missing something goes out the window.
Yeah, I was going to make a joke because there's busy, there's very busy, and then there's senior living. I thought that was the joke that you were going to make, because it's crazy. And it's such a nice experience for your staff that they don't have to go out of their way. I mean, I see it on the clinical and operational side. They're like, this will automatically tell them that they need product and when to stop it. Yes, right. That also makes the lift for the people that are doing the education in the communities better too, right? This is a great experience. It'll be automatic and it'll automatically end. You'll never get charged, overages or, whatever it is. But people think it's very advanced and they see, again, the communities as the authoritative and educated, piece of this puzzle. They're really looking for leadership in that aspect. And it seems very savvy and very sophisticated to have these types of integrations in place. And plus, I mean, I love it. It's awesome. The more things that the assessment can do, the heavy lifting in the community, the better. But we've been kind of putting together some materials about how this kind of interplays with value-based care and, what we're seeing there from a monetization aspect. Ara, any thoughts on this value-based care? This is not my area of expertise. I dabble, but any thoughts on this one?
It's wellness. If value-based care is done right, you're going to have the loved ones of family staying with you for a very long time, because you're getting ahead of the game. You're getting ahead of the incidences, and it's preventative medicine. The one thought that I'd like to share with everyone is that just because a family has been doing it a certain way for a very long time in their home and they're used to it, doesn't mean it's the right way. And I see that a lot. Families do a lot of their own research. They are doing a certain way, and then they almost hand over and expect the wrong way of doing things and give it to you. Because families are moving their loved ones in, and I'm going to come back to hygiene or UTIs. They're dealing with that. And if they are like, okay, this is how I always do it, here you go, they're giving that problem over to you. They're trying to get rid of the odor at their home. But that doesn't mean that they're taking that and putting it in your community, right? And with value-based care, we're looking at this from a place of what can we do that the family was not able to serve, right? How can we partner with mobile physician groups? How can we partner with the correct groups and create these service lines where it's a win-win? Oftentimes we think that more expenses means a win-win, means like you're going to have to spend more to get better care. Not necessarily, and I want to kind of leave with that thought. This isn't a way to gain more with more money. It's a way to look at a service line and say, how can I maximize this so everybody's winning? It's cost neutral, and I'm adding a revenue stream to my community that can help offset a vacancy.
I mean, I think those are powerful aspects. And I mean, we've covered this a little bit, but the standardization and structure piece, I think, are very tactical, looking at the assessment, looking at kind of the accountabilities of the executive director, business office manager. I spend a lot of time with leadership teams talking about literally who does what, who is accountable for what, and just bringing clarity to that, and
Right.
making sure if we incorporate pieces of education, and the words that you like that I really like are best practices and what's our company's standard of care for this part of our business, right? Again, people are super comfortable doing that for pharmacy, super comfortable. And you can have that in different service lines or revenue lines outside just an outside provider of pharmacy. So we wanted to highlight that. I want to give a minute just to see if there are any questions coming in. You barely bat them off. There has to be one question here somewhere.
Still not in the chat, so the chat's still open if anybody wants to submit anything.
If anyone wants to submit some last minute questions. Let me see my notes, see if there's any way we can, anything we're meeting here. We talked about improved outcomes. Definitely, it's one of those things that people can ask about return on investment, but mostly I'll say that I liked what Ara said. At some point you have to invest in preventing train wrecks, and say we're all looking at incident rates. I work with our clients all the time to say, hey, what does it look like if we get ahead of that? What does it look like if you're preventing those UTIs, those falls, those incidents, and investing in not just this, right? Because it can be, again, along with the skin supplies, the nutritional supplements, really standardizing and having a structured program and standard of care for all these ancillary items can, very much increase length of stay, increase the experience for the resident, empower and increase the experience for the staff in a way that's really powerful, giving them good high quality tools, cannot be underestimated, and then creating a happy, family members and also happy stakeholders in terms of net operating income, top and bottom line. It really, these things bring everything together in a really elegant way. So that's all I have. If we don't have any questions or anyone lighten us up, that's what I had today. Any final thoughts from you, Ara?
Yeah, I'm going to end on a teaser for value-based care, because a question may be, what is value-based care? Like what even is it, right?
Yeah.
Well, it has a lot to do with Medicare. It has a lot to do with allowing a resident to be healthy for a longer period of time. And the approach for value-based care is keeping the resident healthier by preventative approaches versus always diagnosing and having to go to the hospital because the preventative actions were not taken. So that's kind of in a nutshell what it is. But at the end of the day, I appreciate what everybody does in senior living. It's not easy, right? And I like what you said, Trisha. Busy, very busy, senior living busy, right? And I hope that getting out of this webinar, you just kind of understand how some operators, i.e. hospitals, right, have done it for a very long time. And you in the middle of a senior living community have all these service lines you're already providing. It's a matter of just looking at them and saying, am I providing them and maximizing them from a win-win perspective? And I'd encourage you to do that.
That's great. I mean, I didn't talk to you about this, but do you want to offer any incentives if people are interested in Tim, if they email today or have interest? I mean, I'm literally just making this up. I didn't even tell you about it. Uh,
Sure.
any one-time promotions for someone at this webinar that stayed until the last 2 minutes that you want to pass along?
Sure, let's do a 50% incentive discount on the first month. Let's do that. And they can literally just email me.
And mention the webinar.
And mention the webinar. That would be great. A 50% discount on the first month.
Okay, I'll match that. Anyone, I mean, I don't know if anyone here is not on Alice, but if they're not, I can match, yeah, a full, I don't know, 2 months free for a new community on Alice, something like that. If you're watching this webinar, save the juiciest parts for last. Definitely mention it. And then Taylor, keep me honest on this when finance comes and looks for me. But just a bonus thing. So thank you all for coming. Happy Friday, and we'll see you for the value-based care side.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay,
Thanks,
bye-bye.
Trisha. Thanks, Taylor.